the CEO Dialogue. For those that don't know me, I'm a learning and meeting strategist. So these types of events are things that I love to be involved in, and certainly happy to be involved in this innovative conversation today. I'm also a certified technology of participation facilitator and mentor trainer, which means that I love to facilitate and moderate conversations. And lastly, some of you may know me as an association author, coach, and speaker. My real passion lies in this partnership with associations around engaging multisensory learning and networking experiences. And I'm in particular interested in helping organizations reimagine meetings and events either in person or virtual that are sort of losing revenue or engagement or satisfaction. For those that joined us just a little late, or maybe are just joining us now, two quick housekeeping matters I want to point your attention to. First, at the bottom of your screen, you will have a Q&A button. That is a great opportunity to ask our panelists at any point in time during our conversation today questions that you might have either generally or specifically to one or more of them. You can also use the chat function or feature that's also available in your Zoom screen. Just be sure to toggle sort of your to function or feature to all panelists and attendees to be sure that we can see your comments, your remarks, your insights. Certainly, I'll say right off the bat that I think none of the panelists today believe that we are experts in resilience. However, we've had to not only experience it ourselves over the past 4 or 5 months, but I have been thinking about it intentionally and have some food for thought, some ideas, some insights, some perspectives to share with you today that we think that you will find helpful. But we know that you're great collaborators, knowledge experts, subject matter experts on this topic as well. And so if you have ideas, insights, resources, blog posts, videos, webinars, recordings to share with us, please do that in the chat box as well. We really come in the spirit of sharing, and we hope that you will come in the spirit of sharing as well. We will be recording our webcast today. The recording link will be available within 1 week of the program today, and it'll be available on the issue roundup page on ASE's website. So you can certainly access that later should you want to come back to it, or if you want to share it with others on your team, certainly feel free to do that as well. So today I am charged first and foremost to establish a baseline of what we mean by resilience. And when I look up the term resilience, I get a pretty simple definition, and I just wanted to share that with you now as sort of a baseline. Resilience is defined as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And let me say that again, the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And we've had a number of difficulties and challenge over the course of the past several months. I'm going to outline some of them here, and certainly you will have others to add to my list. But as we think about resilience today, we'll be specifically thinking about it in terms of a number of levels, both at the individual level, at the sort of team or organization level, as well as at your industry level. And realize that this conversation around resilience sort of cuts deep into any number of those segments. So why now? Why are we talking about resilience now? I feel like we're on the cusp of it becoming a buzzword that maybe will be overused or overplayed. And so I hope we're catching everyone on the front end of it. But we think that resilience is important now for a number of reasons. Obviously, we're well into this global pandemic that's caused a number of us, if not all of us, to work remotely. And so that's one factor, but there are a number of other factors as well. This discourse around racial inequity is impacting many, the greater community, certainly Black and Brown people, Indigenous people, and people of color in ways that I strive to understand and likely in my lifetime will never fully understand myself. But it's also hopefully causing white association leaders and predominantly white organizations to not only rethink their positions, but also to identify ways in which to commit to action within their organizations, both individually, but also at sort of an organization and industry level. I'm not a parent myself, but I know that many parents joining us on the call today are looking ahead and thinking to the fall semester and in terms of are their kids returning to school, in some cases having to make that difficult choice of what that means for their kids, or the choices being made for them, or they're sort of spinning in this uncertainty as school districts continue to either make up their mind or change their mind about what their plans are and what that means within the context of work and volunteer commitments. And so a lot of uncertainty certainly around that topic. Mental health concerns. Certainly we have Richard on this call today, and he might be willing to talk a little bit more about this a little bit later on in our call, but mental health concerns are escalating for people in ways that I've not experienced in my lifetime, given new circumstances, stressors, and unknowns. And just when we think the runway will end, that maybe we're going to return to work, or maybe things are returning to more of a semblance of normal, that runway keeps getting extended into the fall months, into the latter part of 2020, into 2021 and beyond. And certainly as I think about meetings potentially that are being rescheduled, even for the first and second quarters of next year, we know that there's a lot of uncertainty there. And so this moment today is designed to be an intentional and meaningful pause point where we think to ourselves, wow, we've really encountered and experienced a number of unusual things in the last 4 or 5 months. We've had to demonstrate resilience, whether we called it that or not. And that as we look ahead to the fall and into 2021, that maybe we should be reflecting on these nuggets, these takeaways, to develop an intentional or more meaningful game plan moving forward. Will we be able to develop one plan that is going to for sure work and be the end all be all? No, we're going to have to continue to pivot and be resilient. But if we start to plan in such a way, I think we can do so maybe even more effectively. So that's kind of the context for what we'll be talking about today. Again, happy to have you with us. I'd like to, and certainly our association leaders will introduce themselves a little more fully when we give them an opportunity here momentarily to speak. But I'd love to just take this opportunity to introduce everyone briefly. They've been very gracious by sharing with me sort of a fun fact about them that maybe you don't already know. So I'm going to share that as well, and then I'll certainly turn the floor over to them. So first, Annette Gregg, CMM, MBA, is Senior Vice President of Experience for Meeting Professionals International. I know Annette got a rescue kitty right at the start of COVID. I don't see her here today, but Wheezy is often found on Annette's desk or lap most of the day watching her Zoom calls. I know many of you on this call can relate to pets kind of finding their way into your new experience working from home or working remotely. She says it's been a challenge keeping the cat from chasing the mouse, walking across her keyboard, jumping up on her shoulders. And other than adventures with her new kitty, Annette has enjoyed a lot of quality time this summer with her husband and college-aged son. So welcome, Annette, to the chat today. We're excited to hear more from you here shortly. Next up, we have Charlie Jones, FASAE, CAE, is Senior Vice President of Global Brand Management for Futures Industry Association. During the last 4 months, Charlie's learned to be even more grateful for friends and family. And when this pandemic is behind us, he plans to hug and kiss a lot of people. Additionally, Charlie's never been much on cooking, and living so close to dozens of terrific restaurants hasn't made much of an effort to try, but now, as I understand, has mastered some pretty decent home-cooked meals. And so if you're interested in home cooking, and actually some colleagues and I were laughing this morning, it seems like the bread photos and the bread memes have slowed down a bit. So Charlie might tell us in the chat a little bit about what you've been cooking. So welcome to the chat. We'll hear again from you shortly. Sharon Newport, CAE, is Executive Director of Door Security and Safety Foundation, as well as Chief Operating Officer of DHI, Door Security and Safety Professionals. In the last 4 months, Sharon's learned to relax into the fire, be open, and have a positive presence. And when asked about new hobbies and pastimes, Sharon points to quiet stillness. I love this, Sharon. She's used to having a favorite show on TV or music or just being out and about and always on the go. And now she finds herself needing a lot more quiet stillness, and it's serving her well. And I know we'll hear more about that from you, Sharon, here coming up. And finally, last but not least, of course, Richard Yep is joining us, CAE, FASAE, who is Chief Executive Officer of the American Counseling Association. In the last 4 months, Richards realized that he doesn't have to go out to eat, given the 161 and counting home-cooked dinners in a row that he's eaten. Notice he says eaten and not cooked. I'm interested more about your role in cooking those 161 dinners. He's also got the rust off his bike and is riding again. Moreover, Richard, like many of us, I had this experience as well, celebrated a birthday from home. His wife invited 20 family and friends from around the country to join in on a Zoom-led cooking class from a really great chef, which he tells me was loads of fun. So with that, let me just tell you the quick lay of the land, and then I will stop yammering on. Next up, we sort of have this round robin of sorts. You'll hear from each of our panelists about 5 minutes each to share with us their perspectives on resilience. From there, we're going to jump into this moderated Q&A section. We have some prepared questions that we want to ask and talk through, but we also want to get to all of your great questions as well. So do log them in the Q&A or in the chat function. And then finally, we hope to have time to do this round robin of sorts where each of us just wants to reflect on our conversations today, reminding ourselves that our definitions and our experience with resilience continue to change, that this is an evolving idea, concept, matter for all of us, and that even in the course of this 1 hour conversation, we may have thought about resilience in a new way, and we're just going to lift up some of those new ideas and takeaways for you there. So with that, Sharon, I'm going to have you take it away with your conversation and introduction to us on your perspectives around resilience.
Thank you, Aaron. It's good to get started on this today. So touching on what you foreshadowed a little bit about how I really like to start with self in this moment. I really feel that as a leader, I have a responsibility and accountability to the many layers of system, particularly in associations. We have our staff, we have our members, we have our leadership, and how I show up matters. And in this moment, when I've had to change the way in which I show up and recommit to that every day, which is its own special resilience, I take that really seriously. And I know that in these moments of uncertainty and with the blend of how personal and professional is impacting us in ways that just blur, and we have to stay open to that, and we have to be available to that, and we have to support our staff and our members with that, it's really important that I don't allow what's happening outside of me to shake what's going on for me, so that I'm showing up positive, I'm showing up leaderly, and I'm showing up open to being able to be creative and generating new ideas so that we can continue to pivot and thrive through this moment. So, so that's how I look at it. And I have a few key tenets that I use to support my own thinking, because sometimes, you know, my own stress can get to me and I need some framework to navigate through that. And a cheat sheet that I use is something that anyone can Google. It's called the SCARF method. It's from David Rock. And SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And as David Rock will explain better than I, it's actually considered to be a proven method to neurologically provide calm and presence for everyone you provide that to, so that they too can access creativity and engagement with each other and themselves and their work and those that they're intending to serve. So while you can't always provide these things perfectly and all the time, particularly these days, certainty is a tough one. Sometimes certainty is about what you're going to work on today. Sometimes status is what's true right now. Sometimes relatedness is based on the staff we know is here right now, right? You know, so it has different frameworks that we sometimes need to operate in. So having framework in this moment is really helpful for me.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sharon. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate the SCARF method. I know even on our sort of earlier prep call, you introduced that to us, and I just found it very interesting and certainly a helpful context for thinking about resilience within my own context in ways that I can, you know, approach the topic and conversation not only individually, but also with my team. Something certainly practical and tangible that we can hold on to. Sometimes this idea and topic of resilience seems elusive or seems, you know, hard to put our fingers around. And I think that certainly provides a little bit more context and helpfulness. So thank you. All right, so with that, we're going to turn our attention now to Annette. Annette, I'd love for you to join the conversation and just give us your sort of initial perspectives around this topic of resilience.
Hi, everybody. Well, Aaron, just want to also start off by saying thank you to you and ASAE for really convening a topic that is so timely and necessary We all know as leaders that we sometimes put ourselves last and often do, and it's sometimes our tanks are empty before we start paying ourselves the attention we need. So for me, I was thinking about what are the keys to my personal resilience during this time. You may know Meeting Professionals International, MPI, we represent live meeting engagement and live meeting producers. So we're really struggling during this time, like so many other industries. And a lot of us are looking to us, a lot of our members looking to us for that leadership, that hope that they have, that they need to find for recovery and just sustaining during such a time of uncertainty. So I was thinking about, gosh, leading in times of uncertainty is really the same rules that I would apply to myself for finding my own resilience. So I have three things that come to mind. The first one is just clarity. And part of that comes from Marcus Buckingham's book. I love him. He's a leadership guy I've read a few times, but the book is One Thing You Need to Know. And it's just really about being clear about what really matters. Sharon alluded to this, but maybe it's just that one thing today that really matters. Because I know when I'm not at my best, I am just spread too thin and I'm not focused. And that's when I don't feel as resilient. I've got to just remember there's only a couple things that really matter. And if I can communicate that to my teams, then they're going to be more resilient also. The second thing is really just embracing authenticity. This is a time where I don't have all the answers and I need to give myself a break and just say, hey team, I'm doing the best I can too. These are uncharted waters for us and for our industry. And that connection that I can have with my team, just showing up authentic, even if I don't have all the answers, is really just humanizing what we're all going through and building empathy and trust. And I think that that's a major lesson for me in my own resilience. If I can be authentic, then I'm going to have more in my gas tank to keep going. And then third for me is another great author. I just happened to reread it in the middle of all this stuff, Jim Collins' Good to Great. And he talks about the Stockdale principle and Stockdale paradox. And it's really critical for, again, our industry and live events. But he goes through the narrative of interviewing Admiral Jim Stockdale, who was a POW in the Vietnam War. And he asked Stockdale, how did he survive 8 years of torture? And he said two things. I did not shy away from the brutal facts of reality, but I never lost hope that in the end we will win. And I thought, that's it. That's what I need for my daily resilience, and also to bring hope to my industry and my team that, hey, we know that this is tough and we can't put our heads in the sand. But in the end, at least for our industry, live engagement, meeting face-to-face, we will get through this. We'll get through this together. And so that's really helped just, again, build up my own reserves.
I love that. We're getting, I think in addition to, we talked a little bit about this topic of resilience being something that can feel sometimes a little squishy, a little touchy-feely, and that sometimes as executives, as leaders, maybe we're not as comfortable sort of leaning into that space. But I think giving these sort of tangible takeaways around either the SCARF method or, Annette, to your point, these sort of ideas around clarity and authenticity and reality and hope, they give us something to sort of put our hands around, our fingers around, as we think about their application to us, to our teams, to our organizations, and certainly to our industries. So thank you so much for sharing that. And I know we'll dig more deeply into that as our conversation today unfolds. So with that, I'll turn our attention now to Charlie. So welcome, Charlie, to the panel. And we'd love to hear your perspectives on this topic.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. I think for us at FIA, like most organizations, we're forced to confront something quickly, that had its own time frame. I think typically associations can choose when to launch a new program, product, or service, or invest in a new platform or technology, but then we choose the timeline for that, right? However, COVID-19 made postponing decision-making or action not an option, especially in our case, when our annual meeting was to be held in the second week of March. And you'll recall, most of you at the time, we were considering new social norms like no handshakes as a possible way to carry on. And of course, we know we canceled that and every in-person meeting since. But I think it represented a similar set of challenges for all of us, including, first and foremost, the care and safety of our staff, the business continuity, in this work from home environment. There were, many that were skeptical about how effective we'd be, and if everyone, particularly in our organization on 3 continents, we're going to work from home. But to support our members, you know, the ongoing needs they have during this time, and then really creating a connected community, I think was especially important for us, just for our members, but also I think for as association professionals, and even, you know, in places where we live. I think community has been one of the reasons that I think we have been more resilient. I think it also means we have to focus on the member needs versus wants, right? We have to be more relevant, more essential, more precise in what we offer. I think it's also a period where we've surfaced some things that we don't need to keep doing. So that has sort of been a takeaway for us. Essentially, this pandemic forced us all to act quickly, to take risks, and to test the limits of our staff. And of course, nothing gets done in organizations without, you know, dedicated and competent staff. And I think, you know, leading staff during this pandemic, and especially in the wake of George Floyd's killing, you know, it's meant to be more inclusive and more personal, more holistic as leaders, you know, having those difficult but important conversations around race, for example. I think exploring and making room for personal discussions with the team, confronting fears and anxieties and the uncertainty of future, all this stuff that's not typical in the pre-COVID world, but being open and available and ensuring a safe space for dialogue and self-expression. And I think I'll echo what my other panelists have said. You know, you had to get comfortable saying, I don't know, or I don't have the answer to that. I think as a result of the last 6 months, these personal conversations we're having, you know, they've deepened our connection and support of one another. We get the privilege of seeing our colleagues in their home environment, often with family members and kids especially, I think. You know, at FIA, we hold these regular FIA's Got Talent sessions where staff share insights on everything from tips on cooking to gardening to artistic hobbies. And of course, none of this has anything to do with our work at FIA, but it gives us a little more perspective on our colleagues and their passions, and it builds a deeper connection. I think typically we're in this cycle driven by execution and delivery. You know, COVID has provided a mandatory timeout, you know, given us the opportunity out of necessity to really focus intently on the well-being of our staff and really what matters to our community. I think we've also strengthened our connections with partners and vendors, many of whom have been incredibly flexible, especially I think about our venues and the hotels we work with, allowing us to cancel without penalties. You know, this of course had something to do with a long-standing relationship, which I think is a key learning for us, that, you know, these relationships matter and they help you persevere, they help you be resilient. As a community of association peers, you know, we've probably gotten closer as well with all these virtual learning opportunities like the one we're having now, or virtual happy hours. I've joined regular discussions on everything from confronting racial injustices, social inequalities, to how do you manage complex business decisions in an uncertain environment, and even collaborating with our competition. You know, I've shared, you know, decisions about everything from communication strategy to technology platforms that we might be considering, all in an effort to sort of better serve our respective memberships, but also a shared community. And I do think, you know, it's true, we are all in this together. You know, no doubt our evolving future business models will be very different than what we knew before the pandemic. And resiliency is going to be about delivering what is most relevant, being accessible, being responsive. And as Susan Robertson recently stated on a previous webinar, she said, what's on the other side won't look like before. And I couldn't agree more. I think if there's a silver lining, it might be that, you know, the circumstances have aligned to place us all in the same boat at the same time, which essentially led to a reset, really, of organizational norms, of association norms. And in the process, we've sparked incredible innovation. We've increased our skills, we've built new relationships, and we've really you know, organized a new way of thinking and doing what we do in association management. And just one final thought, I think the pace, you know, coupled with the ongoing uncertainty, is not sustainable for our staff. We're already working longer. You know, as a recent study suggested, we're adding 48 minutes to our day. I think that's probably on the low end. And we're already at capacities beyond pre-COVID levels. So I'm already looking at ways to ease off, to throttle back, and to, again, focus on what's essential, improve our prioritization efforts, and encourage staff to take care of, themselves, whether it's vacation or just making time for themselves. I think resiliency also means we've got to continue to nurture our staff. You've heard others say this, and you're going to hear more about it, but it's the assurance that we're in this together, we support them, we'll continue to take care of them. They are the organization's most important asset. So I'll leave it at that.
So Charlie, so much certainly to think about there. I couldn't lift up even just one thing that I wanted to comment on. The first thing that I think I wanted to just remind ourselves or lift up at this moment is sort of this conversation around doing more. I mean, somebody even pointed to it in the chat box and said, look, like I had 3 meetings scheduled for 1 to 2 p.m. in my local time zone. Like I had to make a choice of where to go. And I've recently been having these own conversations with myself and my team around just how many things we're stacking into a day that if we were doing them in person, we would never do such a thing. But somehow, as a result of our circumstances and as a result of maybe a period of sort of downtime during the initial phase of the pandemic where people just, there was more unknown than known. And somehow as we move into the summer and fall months, it seems like things are picking back up, even though they may look differently. People are eager to act, they're eager to work, they're eager to give. They're trying to think about how they're going to navigate kids and potentially kids even learning from home and sort of shoehorning more and more and more and more things into their day. And just being mindful of the impact that that sort of scenario is going to have for our people is something important to consider, because the other thing that I heard you say was just the importance of sort of checking in with our people and how important that is. And I know we'll hear more about that as our session today unfolds, but I think that can't be underestimated enough. And, whereas we maybe didn't know as much about certain staff members, or we didn't know about their personal experiences or history, maybe we are learning more about that. And it is important to think about as we create equitable workplaces for our organizations, for our staffs, that a one-size-fits-all mentality or approach isn't going to be a solution that works for our staff and isn't going to be successful for our organizations. And how are we going to lay out or create more individualized and personalized experiences for our team members, our staffs, and even for our volunteers? And so all great things. As we know, this group can talk about this ad nauseum. And so I'll put a close on my comments, but just thank you for that. Richard, we'll turn to you for your sort of overview and insight into resilience and sort of the approach that you're thinking and taking coming into this conversation. And then we'll come back to the full group to sort of open up a larger dialogue around some of the great questions that are coming in the chat.
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay, great. So thanks, Aaron. And I am the CEO at the American Counseling Association. So our 51,000 members are mental health counselors, school counselors, rehab counselors. Don't think for a minute that just because they're counselors, they're getting through this any easier than any of us are. I will tell you that to me, and I won't make this real long, but resilience to me is sort of like coming through this dark tunnel, right? Or through a storm, whatever you want to use. And coming out on the other end even stronger and more creative and with greater focus. That's what resilience is. And it's like, resilience isn't really like a brick wall, right? It's more of a sponge where the anxiety and the concerns and other worries that people have, they're still there, but they're seeping through at a slower rate because we're getting more control over the things that we're being faced with. So what we've experienced over the last 5 months, 6 months, that horizon of resiliency really has changed for all of us. So you have COVID, you have racial injustice, you have police violence, all issues that need to be addressed. And this raises that vulnerability that we have to a whole new level. But I do think it's led to having much more open conversations. I know I see my staff way more than I did before the pandemic, for example. I think resilience is sort of like seeing all of this through the lens of an incredible learning lab. but we've been tossed into it and we're trying to work as fast as we can. And, you know, with that comes a realization that stressful jobs become even more stressful, and it can be more stressful because now you've taken home and work and you've blended them together. And there goes that proverbial work-life balance that we try to talk about. So it's kind of like, rather than like most of us get a new board chair or a new president every year or every 2 years, it's like getting one every month. That's how fast all of this has happened to us. So the resilience part is knowing that we don't have to keep moving as fast because it's not sustainable, just like Charlie said. So I think that because that line has blurred so much between work and home, and you know, you're in your family room and you can check one more email before you turn it off, and you don't really turn it off and you go and end up doing even more work for the rest of the night. It's really important that we learn how to reframe everything that we're doing. You know, people say this is an inflection point. They're right. This is an incredible inflection point for us. And everything we were doing before has been accelerated. So we need to get a hold of that and have some control. Aaron?
Yeah, thank you so much for your insights. While you were speaking, Richard, I'm trying to curate some of the great content and questions that folks are putting in the chat box. So let me try to do and pivot now to some of that as we think about this sort of open, moderated conversation. Again, please continue to keep your questions and chat comments coming. I'm appreciating all of the great resources that people are using or relying upon to have these conversations. Thinking about it either themselves individually or thinking about having these conversations with their staffs. Somebody mentioned in the chat that we have been leaning into our strengths-based approach and thinking about these concepts and values around trust and compassion and stability and hope, and looking at hope as honoring other people's experiences and understanding that although we are in this together, quote unquote, we're not all experiencing it in exactly the same way, right? And so being mindful that everyone's unique experience is different, and we need to think about how we're creating infrastructure or support systems to help people on an equitable basis versus just trying to provide a one-size-fits-all solution. So that's one thing I wanted to comment on. One question from the chat I'd like to open up to the panel is that given impacts are now demonstrating to be much longer term, that will cause continued market challenges, how will resilience inform very difficult decisions we face as CEOs to run our businesses? Curious thoughts that you all might have.
I can start. You know, I think that this is, we used to have strategic plans that maybe were a couple years, and now we have to have quarterly strategic plans. I mean, I think we actually did this. We had employed a great consulting firm. They were about to do our 2025 plan. We scrapped it all and said, hey, we need a 9-month plan. And that it's incredibly time consuming. It's a lot of right brain energy, but it's the discipline that we need to do. And this is layered on top of 2 rounds of staff cuts that we did, a huge amount of reforecasting around our membership drop and everything else. So it is one of the most challenging times as a leader I've ever been through. And I think Richard alluded to it. It's short-term, quick planning. And I don't see, until we have confidence in when the recovery is, I don't see any way around it. We just have to continue to examine, in my opinion, examine 3 months, 4 months at a time.
I think that's true, but I think you also have to think about scenarios, right? So we're doing scenario planning. It's the what if we get this, then we've got this plan. If this doesn't come through, you know, what's this plan? So I think you also have to think about the scenarios that will impact your organization.
Oh, go ahead, Richard.
I was just going to say, you know, sometimes there are things that are happening that we were not, that we didn't know would happen. For example, when COVID hit, we then made 15 online CEs available to our members on telebehavioral health. So they would know how to do counseling over the internet. We had 24,000 people sign up for those free CEs. that led to increasing in membership, and then because we opened it up to members and non-members as well. So there were things we're finding that we never thought about doing that before. So something to think about.
Awesome. Yeah, I was just thinking about events in particular in the event space right now, and I don't certainly have to tell Annette this or any of you likely, but for a lot of our either fourth quarter events or even into the first couple of quarters of next year, we're simultaneously planning. If the event runs in person, this is what it looks like. If it runs online, like we're going to stretch it out over these weeks, or we're going to build a hybrid event. And so we are simultaneously, to Charlie's point, sort of scenario planning and getting commitments up front for an if this, then this, or if that, then that scenario, so that we don't have to go back to the well every time to say, okay, well, as a speaker, you were committed for this date and now we'd like to move you again. We're just sort of doing it at once. And although it is a big lift, I think, Charlie, you also mentioned, like maybe just doing fewer things. We have to pull back a little bit in 2021 and do our core competencies, our core events better than we have in the past, or in a different way than we have in the past, and being okay with doing some fewer things. I did want to talk about this. Not that I want to get into specific consultant suggestions, although there are a number in the chat box, so folks can continue to share those. But I'm curious from the panel, either have you had this conversation with your staff, or if you've not yet, what are some maybe things to think about as we not only have this conversation with ourselves, maybe as CEOs and leaders, but how do we have this conversation with the staff in a way that kind of shows some vulnerability?
Well, I think you have to be authentic. That's one thing. You have to be willing to, and I sort of grew up in the corporate environment, and so I'm not always. When I started working in association management, people said, you got to spend more time, be more personable, and all those things. So, it's not necessarily how I was trained, but I think you have to be more willing to listen. You have to really probe and continue to probe. I mean, I think every call I have with one-on-ones or even team calls, it starts with, how are we doing? How are you doing? And when you say it in a way that's authentic, and you mean it, you get some answers, and you can work with that. I just think you have to, again, create the space that allows for that discussion.
Yeah, the other thing that comes to mind as you say that, because authenticity, but certainly vulnerability. I mean, we've said some of these key tenets already, but one of the things that I have chosen to do is use myself as an example when trying to create a safe space for the vulnerability. Is I'll share something that they can see is either going to be news to them because I wouldn't have shared it necessarily before, or I'm willing to go somewhere a little more personal. But they maybe didn't know I was struggling with something, or that I'm, and so, what's going on for us right now. A really key time was when all of the riots happened that weekend, and I had to show up Monday morning, and how do I show up that Monday morning, and how do I have a dialogue with my team? What do I talk about? I can't not address this, but oh my goodness, things had changed. So I use myself to create a tone and to illustrate where I'm willing to go. But I also feel like I have to constantly prove as a value I have that you'll be safe here when, because there's just constantly stuff going on. People are having lots of unfortunate things happen to them that are privately happening to them. People passing away, people, lots of things, people losing their jobs that are close to them. So you want to be able to just let them feel that on any given moment. And that's different than I feel like prior to COVID.
Well, and Sharon, I don't know if this is for you or for others. I want to keep on the same topic. We're getting a couple of questions around how do you be authentic without freaking staff out? And one of the questions that I had for you all when we were prepping a couple of weeks ago was, how do you, or can you say to your staff, I'm having a bad day, I'm having a bad week? Like, what does that look like? I'm curious thoughts on that.
Well, for me, it came to mind similar to the Stockdale principle. I mean, can we can we keep everyone focused on the hope that is out there further down, and still recognize that we may not be experiencing that hope today? And I think both that tension is human, that human, it's okay to show up and say, boy, this is frustrating to me too, guys. But I know in the end, we've been through tough times before and we'll get there again. So I love sharing, I love safe space so much. And I think as leaders, really, it's so important on all levels. And the other thing I just want to say there is really just walking our talk. I mean, it's one thing for me to say, hey, I want you all to take care of yourselves. And I want you to, make sure you've got enough gas in the tank. But if I'm still holding my expectations as if before layoffs, when they had more headcount, when they had more time, then that's on me. So I have to recalibrate and really create safe space by walking the talk and funneling that down.
I think also recognizing little successes. These conversations are always very heavy, but to balance that out, I mean, it can't always be these heavy conversations, right? So, we really try to celebrate even the littlest of successes. I started this weekly recognition of, staff kudos, and it's the smallest thing. And, you can see it every day in the way staff perform. There's something there that you can sort of pull out and say, that's a good example of how we should be looking at this and the attitude we should have.
So there are some questions around scenario planning. So a couple of things. First, for those of you that are interested in scenario planning, I'll probably say this again at the end of our time together today, but the next CEO dialogue is scheduled for Wednesday, September 24th at noon Eastern time. And the panel will explore the topic planning in the midst of continual change. And it will have some sort of focus on this topic around scenario planning. But let me kind of share with you a couple of questions that I'm getting here. Somebody is asking, in terms of scenario planning around events, how far out are your go, no-go dates for in-person? Annette, you certainly are going to be on the hook for this, so I'll come to you in a moment. Mm-hmm. The other sort of question I'm getting around scenario planning is, in terms of scenarios, for example, trying to plan 2 or 3 different types of meetings, this can create even more stress and uncertainty and potentially paralyze us. So how do we find a balance between making early decisions to provide clarity and focus versus keeping options open? Curious your thoughts on either of those topics, and certainly I will open it up to the greater panel as well.
Well, I can start with the live events one. We took a survey recently of our membership who are event organizers, and they're mostly looking at 2021 Q3 for their Q2 or Q3 for their first live event. That said, MPI, we're having a live event in 10 weeks. So we are going forward this year with a live version and an online version. So we call that a hybrid. We're doing our annual conference hybrid because where we are having the event, so far the government is allowing that. So I think we can talk offline, but you always want to defer to the government of the local place where you're holding the event and see what's happening with case rates and things like that, and your clauses in your hotel contracts, et cetera.
Awesome. Other ideas from the panel?
Well, I think that part of it is making sure that, like we were saying earlier, you walk the talk, and part of that is we are extremely concerned about the health and safety of our members, of our attendees, and of our staff. And I think when you convey that, boards of directors are more open to, yeah, we don't want to take this extreme liability that we shouldn't, and take all these risks. And so, I do have a very caring board. I will acknowledge that they're caring, compassionate, all the other stuff. But I think we have to do that because, going back to what we were talking about earlier, our staffs are looking at us even more than they used to in terms of, are you vulnerable? Are you willing to take care of me? Are we being protected here? So that's important. I mean, there's so many different things going on, right?
To your point, Richard, somebody in the chat box has said, I have a board member who says to me and our team that there are no apologies during COVID times. We're all getting through this together. Somebody else indicated that they have invested in a personal coach during this time, sort of think and reflect and consider how they might show up to their own organizations and for their staffs and boards as well. I'm going to put in the chat box just a Facebook community that's called Healthy by Association, where this conversation around health and wellness continues into sort of the resilience category. Not only, I think we hear the term self-care, and again, that can feel a little fluffy, but I think more so than ever before in my life, like realizing that I need to say no sometimes, and I need to take care of myself, I need to create healthy boundaries has never been more important than right now, because days can blur into weeks, can blur into months, can blur into years. And I just don't think that we want that for ourselves and for our organizations during this time. I'm curious if there are any have any of you been thinking about what it means to take care of yourself, and what does that look like for you in particular?
I'll throw out one of the things that somehow was slightly referenced earlier about the blur. Oh, I think Charlie said it about the, oh no, Richard might have said it. I think we've all said it, but there's that blur of you go to dinner and then come back and do an email, and then, oh gosh, I'm an hour in and I'm still doing the work, and it's Saturday, I'll just check something real quick, One of the things that for all of us struggle with was the premise of work-life balance. And prior to COVID, I had come across my own philosophy of things that needed to just blend, that I just needed to blend, that if I really love my work, I will blend it in a way that I will have boundaries and I will create time that's sacred for this and sacred for this, but that if I love what I'm doing, it's just a little more blended. And when I shut down, it's because I'm creating sacred space for this, but it doesn't mean that sometimes it's important to blend. And so I've played with that differently in COVID, but I've also had to really keep in mind that so is everybody else. And so when I get emails from my team at weird hours and I'm worried they've been working the whole day, it's really because they're playing with their blend, right? They might have stopped at 3, taken a break to do things with kids or family, picking it back up at 7, which is not abnormal prior to COVID, but so much more common. And the pattern I would know of people on staff and the way they prefer to work, they're playing it with it too. And me being flexible around that and not getting upset about, oh my God, how much are you working? What's going on over there? Really making sure I stay in dialogue with people's preferred patterns so that I'm really understanding how they're staying healthy as well, or playing with it, because we're all having to figure it out as we go.
Well, and I think that, because we're all doing so much on Zoom now, it's a very different way to have a meeting. We're not sitting there shooting the crap a little bit before we start the meeting. It's bam, we start, and then we're done, and then we move on to the next one. We've got to slow that down. And whether you, share your playlist and play a little music before the meeting starts, or whatever it is you do, we post something on our internal communication site each week, and it might be post your favorite picture of when you were a kid, or post something that meant something to you this week, or something you were thankful for. We've got to get back to more of those types of connections, I think.
And to realize that on the exact same day, people are at complete different extremes. We sometimes we'll sometimes pull up a feelings wheel on our Zoom calls and just tell me 1 or 2 words that stand out to you in terms of what you're feeling right now. And what you'll undoubtedly see is that someone's feeling at their all-time high and someone's feeling at their all-time low. And there are a range of feelings and emotions in between. And that is always true, but it is even more true now. And thinking about how we're setting up systems, structures, policies, and procedures to support people in navigating those feelings and experiences in a way that we probably haven't done so before. Okay, so I am mindful of time, and I have 2 burning things that I feel like we need to address. First, in the chat, there's this series of questions being raised around volunteers. What do your relationships with volunteers look like during this time when they're dealing with their own challenges? Quick decisions are needed, and the layers of bureaucracy may become too cumbersome, but also I find the volunteer leaders are being more in the weeds than in the past. I recognize it is a way for them to handle their anxieties and uncertainties. I continue to push for decisions that need to be made and not let them sidestep some of the hard questions that must be answered so we can continue to move forward in a timely way. And so I'm curious, any thoughts or feelings, reactions in terms of how are you helping your members be resilient during this time?
Mm-hmm. Well, again, I can start. So many of our members are struggling with just losing their jobs and losing their companies. We have a lot of small businesses in our membership base. in the events world. And so my mind goes to two places. We have our chapter leaders. We have about a 70 chapter structure around the world. And one response we've had is to lessen any of the metrics that we were going to hold them accountable for 2020 have really been thrown out. So we didn't want our chapter leaders to worry about, boy, do I still need to tick off all these boxes, when we just want them to call their chapter members and do a TLC call. So we just really changed the whole focus of what it means to be a chapter leader this year and said, look, just make some phone calls, just reach out. Don't worry about, certain boxes. So that's one thing we did, is really reduce that. And the second thing is, did a whole outreach on, we created a resource page for wellness on our website, and career resources. Again, that's really hitting our membership hard. And so those two efforts, we just really beefed up in the short term and launched them quickly.
Awesome.
I'll say for leadership, I feel like it's been really important to connect and communicate more, and assure them of how you're focusing on strategy and navigating the operational shifts as swiftly as possible, making the most of the resources that are there, really thinking ahead as best as ahead can be. And I feel like providing, frankly, some of the SCARF stuff to your leadership and your board is really pretty important. And it helps them not worry about the tactics and remain strategic with you, and remain open and committed and supportive of the fact that you're doing all the right things, that we're doing all the right things. We've got our eyes on the prize in the right way. And while we have challenges, we're working towards that big, beautiful goal. And it might change in 3 months, but we'll be okay with that. And here's what we're seeing around that. I feel like, and we've pivoted the way in which we provide updates from staff. They used to be written. They are now on Zoom with a quick PowerPoint, a quick 1 hour meeting. They're more often staying very close to what we would deem the executive committees on a much more regular basis, almost monthly at this point. So I think that communicating and staying close and showing how you're working ahead helps them stay there with you.
And Christina's sort of raising in the chat that sometimes our volunteers need reinforcement in a way that we typically wouldn't have given before, but just telling our members that they're doing a good job, that they are making a difference, that they're having impact, that maybe they're not getting the positive reinforcement in other places, and that maybe we can be part of that for them. All right, I'm going to do this thing that please don't make me regret doing. We're going to do a quick round robin, and I'm start with Richard, but really, Richard, we didn't really get to the topic of, like, what is the nugget as you look ahead to the year end for 2020, as you look ahead to the start of 2021, how are you planning better or differently for resilience, whether it's for you, for your staff, for your organization? I'd love to get just a quick, maybe 30 seconds from everyone. And if I can, I'd like to start with you.
Well, we're going to be able to celebrate the fact that we made it through all of the things that we had to over the last several months. And, nobody wanted the pandemic, nobody wanted all these other things that are coming to the forefront. But the key thing is you have to acknowledge that we made it through it, because then people can go, wow, I could handle it. I could work from home. And the other thing is that we're going to acknowledge that things are accelerating, and that's okay. And what I mean by that is that we will be doing a lot of things differently in 2021 that we might have had to wait 5 years for, but now we can do it because we've seen what's happening.
Annette, I'm going to come to you again. We're just kind of looking for these nuggets maybe we've learned over the last 6 months that we want to just create more intentionality as we move forward. And some of you are already dropping some of your own ideas for nuggets, takeaways that you want to intentionally implement moving forward. And please do that in the chat box as well. We would love to capture those. But Annette, I'll come to you now.
Well, I think both Charlie and Richard mentioned parts of this, but we are reinventing a lot of our strategy. We're taking advantage of this crisis to really push on some of the big ideas we've had for a long, long time and haven't really jumped on it. In the midst of that can feel overwhelming to staff, right? So here we're in the middle of this crisis, and now we're going to pivot our business model in big, big ways. And so what I'm trying to do, to keep back to another Jim Collins metaphor is really keep that flywheel going by celebrating the small wins. So these are big projects that we're undertaking, but what are these small things that's a quick test of this new concept that I can help the team feel good about, that we're actually making some progress in the midst of kind of turning this aircraft carrier.
Awesome. Charlie, we'll come to you.
Yeah, I think, we've developed some new skills, some new approaches that they have been all based on reaction, right? And I think for 2021, I hope that we're moving to a proactive position where we take stock of what we've learned through this process and sort of reset and be more intentional about the planning part of it, because it's been a lot of reactivity.
Darren, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to attempt to blend these things because they're all really important nuggets. And I feel like in getting proactive, and I saw someone mention in the chat about instead of survival, it's attempting to thrive. And I think we're all getting more comfortable with not working on the next 3 months, but we're now needing to think about 21. But we know that everything we think today might be different in 2 months. And I think we're more used to that now. And so I feel like our ability to stay positive, to just say we're working on the right things, we've learned some things, so we're going to do it a little differently. We're looking at what can be live events next year. I don't know, but let's make a plan to get ourselves out very easily if we need to pivot or hybrid differently. And we can do it with more calm and more thrive and more perspective that I think does start with us and then moves forward into our leadership and our staff in a way that we're more skilled at doing now.
Awesome. Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts here. First, I just want to thank you all for joining us and for sharing your great thoughts. This has been a great experience. I certainly want to thank ASAE as well for the opportunity to not only facilitate this conversation, but to actually bring resilience as such an important topic to the lens of CEOs. My sort of concluding thoughts or comments are that if you've not yet had the conversation with your team, you need to do so. Don't expect that they're thinking about it or that they're figuring it out on their own, that isn't a strategy, that we actually need to sort of raise the importance of this conversation by bringing it to staff and team meetings, maybe even one-on-one meetings. And so I think bringing the conversation to light is an important one. And in so doing, knowing that you don't always have all of the answers yourself. So please don't hesitate to continue the conversation with us offline. We're happy to continue to think about resilience, what it means within our context, and know that what we think now is probably going to change even in 30 days and 60 days and 90 days, and maybe just continue to reevaluate and reassess that. We want to thank you for participating, of course, today. We know there are lots of choices to be making, and we're grateful that you spent an hour with us. I want to remind you that the webcast was recorded and will be posted on the website within a week's time. And while ASAE CEO dialogues have been created as a response to COVID-19, they have been of tremendous value and are now part of the overall programmatic structure. So they will continue monthly for the foreseeable future. I did post the date of the next one, Wednesday, September 24th from 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern time, where the panel will explore the topic of planning in the midst of continual change. With that, that is our time for today. Thanks so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. I hope you have a great day, a great week, a great month, a great balance of 2020, and that you'll stay resilient.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.